Welcome to the iPad Possibilities Podcast, episode number 18, iPad Observations. This podcast is supported by It's On My Way, found in the App Store for $2.99. It's On My Way is a great app for planning out running errands, going somewhere, and planning out just simple trips that will help you find effective ways to travel. So grab it today to make your life more efficient. Well, welcome, and this is the iPad Possibilities Podcast. I'm Tim, and I'm your host of this show, and this episode is not the live episode you normally receive every Monday morning or Tuesday, but instead it's going to be another studio show, it'll be closer to a weekly thought episode in format. It'll be some of my thoughts that I had over the weekend, and as I've been playing with the iPad and discovering some of the different things about it that we haven't heard much about before. And it will just be a myriad of a bunch of different ideas and things like that. And without further ado, let's get on with the show. Well, first off, I'd like to open the episode by just sharing some thoughts I had on iPad Day, on the release of the iPad. First off, it was the most fun I've ever had at a launch event. It was the first Apple launch event I've actually attended, been to, and covered, and it was a blast. It was so much fun meeting so many people interested in the iPad and doing interviews with a bunch of different backgrounds, people of all ages and all backgrounds that are interested in this device, that know what it can do and not what it can't do. And it was fun to just talk to everybody and gather everybody's thoughts on the iPad. It was also a lot of fun just meeting some of the listeners of this show who were actually at the Apple Store I went to, the Cincinnati Apple Store, and that was so much fun. It was a surreal experience for me meeting people that actually listen to this show. I know people do listen to this show. I can see how many people do listen to the show, and I know people do. So it was just a surreal experience for me, talking with people that listen to the show and just hearing feedback from them, and that was great. If you were at the Cincinnati store, thanks for bearing with me as I recorded everybody. I hope I didn't make too many people feel uncomfortable there. So it was a lot of fun. It was the first Apple launch event I've ever been to, and I think they did extremely well. Everybody that wanted an iPad on Saturday got an iPad on Saturday, including myself, actually. At 7 o'clock, as I was heading home to Indianapolis, I thought it over, and I called Apple and confirmed that if you got an iPad, you could return it within 2 weeks. And it would only be $49 to return it in 2 weeks. And in 2 weeks, that is when I expect the 3G iPad to start shipping out, or shortly after. So I said, what the heck? I'm going to go and pick up an iPad, because they weren't sold out. That was one surprising thing about the launch day. They had plenty of iPads in stock pretty much everywhere. They might have sold out in some locations, but if you want an iPad, you could pretty much get one. And that kind of surprised me. I think what the web did was they delayed the shipment of the iPads to April 12th so they could simply supply all the Apple stores with as many iPads as they needed. I don't think there was a real shortage. They just reassessed where they're going to be delivering the iPads to. So if you want an iPad, you can go to an Apple store and pick one up quite easily. And that's what I did. I got the 16 gigabyte Wi-Fi model. So I'll have an iPad for 2 weeks to test it out, put through its paces, so I can actually have some firsthand experience. So I'm not waiting until the end of April to give you guys all of this awesome coverage on the iPad. And it will enable me to give you some more up-to-date information, some more reviews and applications, and more possibilities of what this device actually can do, as I'll actually have my hands on one and actually be using one as a personal device for a couple of weeks. So I do have an iPad 16 gigabyte, and I do have the 64 gigabyte 3G on order, and hopefully it'll ship out by April 17th, which is my due date to bring this iPad back to the Apple Store for my refund. So I do have an iPad, and it's been it's been a fun couple of hours, it's been a day or so since I've had it. I got back from Cincinnati around 10 o'clock and have been getting it all set up and ready since then. Spent the night reading some books and different things like that, and it's a great device. I'll share some of those thoughts in just a few minutes, but it's just been a lot of fun having it. So I'll get to those thoughts a little bit later. Some other kind of interesting thoughts on the demo units at the Apple Store. Some of you probably saw on the live stream, I could not delete applications off the iPads on the demo units, but I could install applications. They have it set up so you can enter your username and ID in the preferences within the iPad on the demo units in the Apple Store. So I did that, and that enabled me to actually purchase applications and download applications on the iPad, knowing that if I purchased anything, I could then re-download it on my own iPad. So I actually bought the Scrabble app to try to test it out in store, and I didn't have two iPhones available to have running the Scrabble application for the Tower because I couldn't do a full demo on there. But I was able to download apps, and I downloaded about 15 to 20 apps in the demo unit. And when I tried to leave, I tried to uninstall everything. They won't delete. You can't jiggle icons around and move them around to delete them. But funnily enough, you can install them. So if you really want to give an Apple Store a lot of grief, I didn't intend to do this. I apologize to the Kenwood Apple Store for doing this. But if you want to give an Apple Store a lot of grief, if you really don't like Apple, you can go over there and install applications on an iPad and really mess up what the stock demo units look like. It was almost a benefit for some of those because I installed like the ABC app and some really cool apps that weren't on the iPad demo units. So it was kind of a benefit to some people, but it probably gave some Apple employees some headaches. I'm not sure how many people tried to install apps on the iPad demo units, but you could. And I thought that was kind of interesting that you actually could. I also thought that the Apple Store is very accommodating towards myself and I think others about covering the launch of the iPad. I remember at the iPhone launch, they really did ban and restrict interviews and conversations with those in line and kept the media out of it, really. And with myself, they didn't do that. They let me get up really close to them, doing live video, streaming the whole time, doing interviews throughout the line, and they were very accommodating to my needs as I needed to cover this for the iPad launch. And they did a great job letting me do all that I need to do. And they let me record and speak very loudly in the store, covering the iPad to bring to you guys at home. And it was wonderful that they let me do that. So that is a nice change that Apple's made from the iPhone launch to this launch. I just wanted to share that quick thought with you as well. So here's some quick questions and answers that I've had over the past few days on the iPad. The first one that I answered in the past, but now we've got an update to that, is VNC and audio. Now, in the past, we've thought that through VNC you can't do audio, no way to do it, impossible. And that's sort of right, but sort of not right. I've been looking through some iPad applications that have come out, and I found one that works with audio. It only works with Windows, but it does work. I haven't tested this because I run Macs, but a Jump Desktop for iPad seems to be, it's a universal application, so it runs on the iPhone. It probably won't be as useful there, but it works with the iPad, works with Bluetooth keyboard, and it looks pretty wonderful. It is for Windows only. There is no Mac support at all, but I've been reading that they do support audio playback through their application. So I'm not sure how they're doing this. It might not be a true VNC, but it is a way to remote desktop your Windows PC at home and get audio back onto the iPad. Another question I had in the live stream Saturday was about this desktop image that you have for the lock screen and the image you have for underneath the applications. And I actually answered incorrectly because it's not apparent right away that you're able to do this, but you can. You're able to change the wallpaper on simply the lock screen, and you're able to do a different background for the application screen. So you're able to have two different sets of applications. And this is really remarkable because on the iPhone, jailbroken iPhones, I've never been one to want to do picture backgrounds on it because I always would want something different for the lock screen than you do on the application screen. You want something that's less in the way on the app screen and more vibrant or whatever on the lock screen. So I do currently have two different pictures on my iPad for the background. So you can do this. It's not really apparent how you do it. So how you do it is you simply go to change the picture, and it will ask you if you want to set the lock screen, set home screen, or set both. So it's very simple. It gives you options to do that. So that was the other question I had. Again, if you do have questions, please send those questions to 209-542-iPad or iPadPossibilities@gmail.com. And that way I can answer all of those questions that you guys have. As I do have an iPad, I can give you all the answers I can about that and do it pretty well, I think. So send those questions in, and I'll do my best to answer those in the next show for Wednesday. So another quick thought for everybody is Gmail works great with the iPad. I'm not sure if you guys have heard of what Google's doing. They actually have an optimized version of Gmail for the iPad, and it works great. It enables you to quickly go through your inbox, and it's exciting for me because I can only imagine that app developers such as Gmail, Mate, and other iPhone developers that have made Gmail applications will start to make iPad Gmail applications that give us that wonderful interface that enable us to do multiple accounts with these applications. And I'm really excited about the possibilities of Gmail developers creating applications that allow you to do multiple accounts and things like that, because that's been a real key for me using the iPhone with multiple accounts are these Gmail application developers. So I have a call out to you developers, please start working on an optimized iPad Gmail application that allows you to do multiple accounts. I've got 5 or 6 accounts I use on a regular basis, and I'm desperately looking for someone to make a Gmail app for the iPad. So it is very cool. The Safari works great with the iPad through Gmail, but I am looking, and I'd love if someone could start working on and creating that Gmail app for the iPad. So now I'd like to move on to some of my favorite applications I've had a chance to play with so far on my iPad. And I've got some top favorites. My top 2 favorites are Evernote and Scrabble. Now, tonight we actually played a game of Scrabble with my family on the iPad. I brought my iPad and brought my 2 iPhones, and we had an iPhone there at the house. And we played our first game of Scrabble on the iPad using the client software on the iPhones to communicate with the iPad as your tile rack and the ability to rotate the board. And overall, it was a great experience, a lot of fun, and worked really well. There were some downsides I'd like to share with you right out of the gate, and that is it is a little bit buggy. It was not a perfect experience. There were times when the iPad lost connection with the iPhones themselves. We had to restart the client apps many times. In some cases, it was only a single player that did this. In some cases, it just dropped the connection for all 3 iPhones. And it ended up, we weren't able to finish the game because of this. We can never get it working again at the end of the game. So it was a little buggy. We did experience one fix is hitting the rotate the screen button actually enabled the game to work again in some cases. We had one case in which We are flicking the tiles off the iPhone onto the iPad, and they just got lost somewhere in the middle. They left the iPhone, never appeared on the iPad, and were just in the cloud, so to speak, and that we couldn't find them. And the fix to this was simply hitting the rotate button to that's the way you should orientate the screen, not by rotating the iPad around, but hit that rotate button, and that fixed it. So it is version 1 software, and I would imagine they'd fix these kind of things in the future. But once those things are fixed, it really was an incredible app when it was working. It was a great experience, lots of fun. It was just a high-tech version of your normal game of Scrabble, and it was a wonderful experience while it was working. My second favorite app, or probably my first favorite app, is Evernote for the iPad. This is simply the best version of Evernote ever created on any sort of computer. There are many reasons for this, and I'll go into those now. The first reason is note creation is simply fantastic on the iPad version. You're able to record audio at the same time as entering your notes via the keyboard or Bluetooth keyboard. So a use case here, a possibility here, is for students. Say you're in class, say you want to take notes like you do on a laptop, but say you want to do this on an iPad. In the past, you weren't able to record audio and type text at the same time. Now you can with Evernote on the iPad. It's recording. I'm doing this now. It just records up top instantly, and you're able to type at the same time. I would recommend making sure you're not a loud typist or very soft with this to turn off the clicks or whatever. And you can type, you can take about 20 minutes per audio clip, and you can put as many audio clips as you want in there. So say you want to only record a part of the lecture, you can just record and save, and then when you're ready for the next part, just hit record and it sends a new audio file. So in the past, it's been even on the Mac, it's been kind of tedious to do this. There are some great applications on the Mac that work like this, that work well like this. But on the iPad, this is so convenient to have. You can simply record the audio you need to record and stop it when you don't want anymore. And you can actually save it from there and just start over with another audio file. So you just get the highlights, the things that you need for the notes, and they can just pile up there on top of the note, and you can actually add pictures from the photo app into your notes, so you can create some pretty robust notes in the Evernote application for the iPad, and that is one of my favorite features of the app. The other is just the general user interface changes they made. First off, browsing through your notes is much easier. You're giving the option of on the top of all notes, notebooks, tags, places, and searches. And with notebooks, we're finally able to quickly see what is inside your notebooks. It looks a lot like the Photos app of the iPad. You're not able to pinch to expand. I hope they would add that in the future. But you're able to sort by name or note count on this area. And you're able to quickly go to find whatever notebook you're looking for. In the iPhone version, it took a lot of scrolling to get through all of the notebooks. On this version, it's very easy. They did a great interface here. And the same goes for tags. And for places, it gets even more interesting, right? Because with places, what they're doing is, as you scroll into a particular area on the map, it'll only show you the notes that you're looking at on the map. So you don't have to click on the little indicator on how many notes are there. They just quickly appear as you're hovering over the map in that certain area. And it's a great way to browse through your notes by location. It's a wonderful implementation of this and will be very productive and very useful for people that use Evernote. And as they get the 3G model and use the iPad on Wi-Fi with location built in, it'll become that much more useful as people start taking more notes because of this iPad client. One of the final things I'd like to talk about is searches. This is the best implementation they've done of searches ever. And you can only find it on the iPad right now. And by searches, I mean save searches that will, for instance, I've got audio notes. All my audio notes are in that saved search. In all my encrypted notes, the things with passwords and things I want to hide from other people if they come across that note, are in a saved search. And in the past, with the Mac app or the Windows app, you had to scroll all the way back down to the bottom, below the notes, below the notebooks, etc., and pull it up there. And that is not a good interface. It's not easy to quickly access those things. On the iPhone, it's even harder to access save searches. You have to go through, I think, 5 different layers of interface to get to those notes that way. And it's a very slow and tedious process. On the iPad, it's up top like everything else and very easy to access that kind of thing. And it is just a wonderful interface. There's not much more to say. There are some things I'd like to see changed about the Evernote iPad version. For instance, I'd love to see full screen PDF viewing and note viewing. Currently, there's no way to full screen a note to just view that note alone. So there is some of the screen taken up by trying to navigate to other notes, which I don't think should be there all the time, but it is. And that's pretty much the only gripe I have with it right now. Is you can't do full screen notes. Otherwise, it's pretty amazing. Another amazing thing is they've enabled Evernote to launch in the same exact location as you left it. Now, this creates a great thing for users because, for example, I was using Evernote on the iPad in the demo unit to quickly pull up what I wanted to check out on the demo unit so I could quickly go back to the same note. And this will be great for when you're writing papers and pages, or it creates a similar effect to multitasking, really. And if more applications started to add this to their iPad apps, this would almost, it wouldn't, but it would almost negate the need for multitasking on the iPad, because the way Evernote implements this is it pulls up exactly where you left off just as quickly as it would switching on a jailbroken iPhone to Evernote. So it really works fantastically. It almost replaces the need for multitasking. It really almost, the only thing it doesn't do is download new content in the background. But besides that, Evernote is what I considered a multitasking-enabled application, meaning you can quickly go back to it and continue where you left off. You don't have to go through the whole thing of reloading a bunch of information and things like that. And it really works great. So those are my top 2 favorite apps. Let me talk about some other favorite apps in just a moment here. Okay. Now I'd like to talk about some probably lesser known apps on the iPad, but some very good apps that I'd like for you guys to check out. The first is called Browser Duo. And as I talked about with Evernote and its multitasking abilities, so to speak, Evernote Duo is a very interesting application that allows you, as the name suggests, to run 2 web browsers at the same time. And you're also able to enable full screen of one of the browsers if you want to, and things like that. But it's a great application that enables you to run side by side 2 different web browsers. So you can be running video in one and surfing for information in the other. And it really creates multiple windows, really, with a web browser. So it's a very cool app. I'd recommend checking it out. I think it was $2 or something like that. I forget the exact price. It's called Browser Duo, and it works really well. I haven't done a bunch with it because most of the things I use browsers for, I just want that one page open. But it is a great app that is one of those apps that will be multitasking enabled, as I'd like to start calling them. Another really cool app that, for those that like the Newton, WritePad. They've got a new version for the iPad, and I was kind of disappointed they're charging $10 for it, but I purchased it. It once again translates your text, your handwriting, to text, and it works great, just like it does on the iPhone. But now you have a larger screen. It is really getting very close to Newton replacement. I'd love if there'd be a way to it not recognize my palm when it rests on the iPad. But beyond that, it's a wonderful app. And if you're looking for a Newton replacement, a handwriting to text way to go, that would be my recommendation. It's called WritePad for iPad. And it works great with the Pogo stylus or just your finger alone. Now, some other apps that I've been playing around with. My favorite Twitter client is Twitterific. I play with some others. Twitterific is my favorite. Dragon Dictation is on the iPad, optimized for it, and it works great as well. If you're looking for a good way to transfer PDF documents on and off the iPad, and you're not looking for an Evernote type application, which is what I use for most things, I'd recommend Goodreader for iPad. It enables you to, within iTunes, sync over PDF documents by simply clicking the Add button in the Apps section, and you can sync documents in iTunes itself. The same way you would do with Pages, I work that whole suite, and it's one of those applications that recognizes, hey, I can accept PDF documents, so let me take those in through iTunes and do that. So Goodreader, it's a great app for that. I've tested it out. It works great like that. Quick note, you 1Password users, there is an iPad app available, but for those that don't know, 1Password Pro will be updated soon to a universal binary, which means you can run it on the iPad. It'll be optimized for the iPad and will run great on your iPhone as well. Some other apps of note. Air Video is going to have an iPad version, but the iPhone version worked really well in our testing. It gave a pretty good picture quality even on that pixel doubled display. Another quick thought I had was, you know, all of these applications you use, such as Mashable, TUAW, and Engadget, IMDb, and things like that, the iPhone apps that you use to access the website, access its content, I've been finding that Safari on the iPad is simply incredible. It really is, as Steve Jobs said, one of the best browsing experiences you'll find. And I'm finding myself using Safari more and more. On the iPhone, it loads pages too slowly for it to be a good way to access Gmail. For instance, I have Gmail now on my dock as a web app, and it loads instantly. Just as fast, actually it's faster than it would on the regular iPhone or whatever. It loads instantly. And so web apps are now, it's kind of funny. Web apps are a really viable alternative right now on the iPad to access information. It's kind of funny because we have this powerful platform to develop apps, but at the same time, since the iPad is getting that much more powerful and advanced, Safari really is bringing things to another level and brings even more possibilities to what is capable through the web browser. I think we'll start seeing more web apps designed for the iPad. CNN has already designed their web page to make videos capable with the iPad, and that works wonderful. And I've uninstalled most of my website apps on the iPad. I've replaced them instead with hot links to the Safari website. And I've done that with Gmail, I've done that with Mashable, I've done that with CNN, I've done that with the unofficial Apple web blog. And I've done that with a bunch of sites. The ones that do make iPad special apps, I'll install those and use that. But Safari, for those that don't have the iPad, it's gotten a lot better. And it'll be interesting in the next few months to see the possibilities that emerge from people finally realizing how powerful this web browser really is. I don't think people have experienced that yet, and they soon will. And I think it'll start a new wave of web app development. It's kind of unusual because the big gripe, I've been seeing some people that are taking more of a political stance against the iPad, as they like to say, about its closed nature and things like that because of the DRM that's all over the iPad, right? So with this instead, I don't see that. I see Safari. I see the ability to write any application you want via the web. I see some powerful applications being written through Safari. And I think that will be more and more as the iPad comes as a more developed platform. Another quick note, the closed nature that they keep on saying, DRM free books are allowed on the iBook store. Or not the store itself, but allowed to be synced to your iPad. So I really don't see where people are coming from as far as this closed nature is concerned. I've had a great experience with it, and Safari is one of those apps that will allow you to do things you never thought possible with the iPad. So for those that don't have the iPad yet, one thought I had for you guys is the iPhone apps that you run on the iPad. The ones that aren't developed, aren't optimized for the iPad. And overall, my experiences have not been very good with those apps. They work great, they do all the same functionality they did on the iPhone, but since there's a lot of iPad apps available, I'm finding myself trying to get rid of as many iPhone apps as possible because they don't look as nice. They don't play as nice. They don't. One thing I've been finding is they won't work in horizontal mode for a lot of the apps I use. And that's one of the biggest problems I'm seeing with it, besides some of the pixelation I'm seeing. But the other biggest thing is some of them don't rotate around. And I like to use my iPad in a horizontal mode. I'm not finding myself using the iPad vertically very often. But more horizontal is how I'm using pretty much the iPad pretty much 90% of the time. It's in horizontal mode. And most of the iPhone apps aren't optimized to do that. For example, the Chase Bank app, you can't run horizontal. You can't run horizontal with many of the apps, and that's a big problem, and one that I hope Apple addresses. Or developers, I guess, would be addressing that problem more than anybody else. But that is one problem I've been seeing. Another quick thought on that is I am tired of seeing developers charging so much for apps that they already... It's a hard situation for developers, right? Because for people that haven't purchased the app, they want a higher price, right, than those that have already purchased the app. And apps like WritePad for iPad, I've already purchased this on the iPhone. I had to buy an iPad special version, and I'm not seeing a bunch of feature differences. It's kind of... I feel a little bit cheated by that. I feel a little bit underappreciated that they did that to me. But at the same time, I understand that for new customers, they have to do that. They have to charge the price it deserves. And I believe $10 is a fair price for WritePad. But since I've already purchased WritePad on the iPhone, I felt kind of cheated by that. And there's other apps that do this. I've heard people complain about Nova doing the same thing. So it's an interesting scenario. Let me know what you think on that whole scenario about iPhone apps and people updating iPad apps that are exactly the same, just better image quality. What do you think about this whole scenario? Are developers being unreasonable in charging the same exact price as they are on the iPad or iPhone? So let me know what you think at 209-542-iPad and at iPadPossibilities@gmail.com. So some quick thoughts on the iPad itself. Its make, its finish, its polish. The first thing I can say is the screen. I know you've heard this before, but the screen is truly remarkable. It's not OLED, but it is simply beautiful. I've got my iPhone sitting next to it, and the screen is... it's not nearly as beautiful. It's not nearly as rich, and I don't know how to describe it over the air, but just go to the Apple Store and just see the screen. It is truly remarkable. And the viewing angle is even more remarkable. We were able to sit around that Scrabble board, and really, any angle you're at, I'm going down now, right now. I'm at eye level with the iPad. I can still see it pretty well. It's remarkable. The viewing angles, you're able to see the iPad screen. It works really well. And one thing about that is, I commented earlier to one of my siblings that because of the viewing angle, because of the size of the device, I think it's the perfect size for a device like this. Is with the laptop and with an iPhone, both scenarios, you're in your own world, really. With the iPad, if you choose, you can be in a world where you're able to not be caught up with everything, because you're able to lay it on your lap and glance down at information as you need it. So you're looking at the web, you can glance down at it, but there's no barrier, right? With the iPhone's right in your face as you're looking through information. You have to put it down, put it away to not have that barrier with you. With the laptops, the same scenario. You've got a screen right in your face. With the iPad, since the viewing angle is as good as it is, you can be in an environment where the iPad's not right in your face all the time, and you can still access the information, you can still view it all, and it's not a problem. So it really creates the first device, or I guess not the first device, but one of the first devices that is great for social interaction where you're not caught up in your own world. So it is an unusual scenario to have that happen. I guess not unusual, but it's a great scenario for Apple to finally enable this through this device. So that's one quick thought on the screen. The overall make of the iPad, everyone's saying it feels heavy to them. I guess it's probably because I've never owned a Kindle. I've never experienced what reading a book on a Kindle is like. But for me, this is really light. I was able to, as you know, I've got several Scotty jackets, and I was able to put it in that iPad, the big pouch for the iPad, put it in there, and I was able to drive around in my car with the iPad in my coat, and I really didn't feel the weight. I didn't feel it being obtrusive. I could tell it was in there, definitely, but I could sit down in the car with the iPad in there, and it didn't feel uncomfortable in any way. The weight is not that bad. It's 1.5 pounds, and it's very compact and very mobile. It's a very, I don't know how to describe it better than that. One thing I should note is a case would probably be good, because I'm looking at the back of mine, and you'll eventually start wearing off that aluminum finish like the original iPhones did. The original iPhone that I have now, you can see that things underneath the original fit and finish. So I would probably recommend a case long term. It'll make the device look better. It does feel great, just the aluminum in your hand, but a case probably would be nice. Besides just keeping the product good, is also the added functionality of different angles to use the device in. So I'm still waiting on my Apple case to ship out. It is prepared for shipment, which is kind of cool, because it was anticipated to ship out the 15th and by the 20th. And it's now Sunday, April 4th, and it was prepared for shipment. And what that meant with the iPad dock is they shipped it out the next day, which would be April 5th. So if that holds true, they are ahead of schedule in shipping out those accessories. And I'm hoping that means they're going to be ahead of schedule in shipping out those 3G iPads. So they are doing well in keeping up with orders, keeping up with shipments, and it's exciting to see all that happen. So the fit and finish of the iPad is very good, very light, feels great in your hand. And people are telling me today that the iPad is not a portable device that you can't just carry around everywhere like you do your iPhone. And that's mostly true. But I always ask anyone that says that is, would you rather carry around an iPad or a laptop? I think most people underappreciate what the iPad brings to the user as far as functionality. I think most people still are in that mindset that I need a so-called real computer. And most people don't realize that the iPad brings most functionality that most people use a computer for. I believe my parents would both benefit from an iPad and could potentially replace their main computer with an iPad. I believe most people don't see the potential and possibilities of this device, and I think they still see it as a large iPod Touch, and because it's faster, they realize it's faster, they realize the screen's bigger, they realize it's going to be much more useful, but I don't believe most people see it as what it truly is. And that is, you have a full computer. It's running a different operating system, but it's still a full computer, and it's designed to be the next mainstream computer for most people, I think. Most people will be able to use this iPad as their computing platform, and they just go to their desktop to sync media down to it when need be. I'm not sure how long that'll be required with wireless technologies, and also for just more complicated things that an iPad would not be suitable for. Another quick thought is simply, I love how the iPad just rotates around. It's a wonderful experience using it just because of that one feature of you can use it in any orientation you want to, and it works wonderful that way. And it's just a joy to use the device. And the lock screen feature is a wonderful addition to it as well. So overall, just my general impressions of the device itself is this is one of the best made Apple products in history. The MacBook Air, which if you go to an Apple store and test out the MacBook Air, it's a wonderful lightweight laptop, very beautiful, very elegant. But the iPad is even more beautiful, even more elegant. It's even more portable than anything else. One thing I always ask people, would they rather carry around a laptop or an iPad? And they have a hard time making that jump from a laptop to an iPad as far as functionality. And I always bring up the point that a laptop is much more susceptible to being damaged when traveling, because it's pretty easy if you're not careful. You can smash that lid into the bottom casing, and it's really easy to break a laptop if you're not careful. You have to be mindful of where your laptop is and how you're packaging it. With the iPad, you're not going to experience very easily a way to damage the iPad as far as crushing it or anything like that because of its form factor. The iPad is meant to be portable. It's meant to travel around. The laptop notebook computers, they're designed to be portable, but I'm not sure how portable they were originally intended to be. So it is interesting with the iPad to see how many people will make that jump and realize how much more portable the iPad truly is. Now on to some more favorite apps. And these are some favorite games. And if you don't have these installed on your iPad, I would hope you look into it at least. And the first is touch hockey. And once you play with it, you'll understand why. The iPad really does turn into a wonderful what do you call it? Air hockey table, really. It turns into a great air hockey table that playing against computer is enjoyable, playing against friends is enjoyable, and it's a wonderful experience on the iPad. And a couple of other games, racing games obviously are amazing on the iPad. I have Asphalt 5 installed on my iPad simply because it was cheaper. It was $7 versus $15 or $10 other companies were charging. And I didn't see any noticeable reason why to get those more expensive apps on your iPad. And Asphalt 5 has been a great game. I've started playing with it. It's a lot of fun. So Asphalt 5 is my recommendation just because of price right now. It is $7, not $10 or $15, and it gives you a really high quality game. I would recommend picking it up. And some other games that I have installed are Labyrinth 2. I've got the light version, and it's a lot of fun. It's just a traditional Labyrinth table that they've expanded from the iPhone, but they've really expanded to take full advantage of the screen size and all of those different things. Another app I wanted to talk about is called Game Table. Now, Game Table is an interesting application. It's unlike anything I've really seen for the iPad yet, as in it simply gives you a board to interact with, right? So you have a checkered board and you move it how you want. And then you can, jump over pieces on checkers board, and it doesn't take things off the board for you. You make up your own rules, you make up your own scenarios for how you're going to play the game, and it remembers each time you launch the app where you left off, things like that on your board. But it's an interesting game. I mean, there aren't rules involved with it at all. So it's got checkers, it's got chess, and it's got a poker table, which you can take out the chips if you want to. But I really don't understand the poker table, because we were trying this out at my dad's house earlier, and the problem you experience with this is there is no good way to view your cards on an iPad, right, with other people playing it. And this is the only way you can play poker on the game table app, is with another person. Because if you try to cover up your hand, well, I guess this would work. We couldn't really find a good way to do it, but I guess the way you would have to do this is covering up your hand on the iPad and double tapping. But then again, it doesn't work that well because it interacts with the device in ways you don't want it to. It's asking me, are you want to shuffle the stack when I cover up the deck? So I think they need to improve some ways to... I think developers will need to find out a way to display cards on the iPad in which you can only see it, perhaps by covering your hand and recognizing that this is your full hand covering in this area of the screen. Perhaps it's through ways that Scrabble does it, like the Tile Rack app. I think that'll be a great option for many people. But right now, Game Table is a nice concept app that I don't think's there yet. I think they need to do some more improvements to it. I think it's there for probably checkers and chess, simply because you're just interacting with a table. But with the card games, it's not quite there for Game Table. So I wanted to let you guys know what I thought about that app. It's been featured in an Engadget in the unofficial Apple weblog, and I thought you guys should know about how that works on the iPad. One app that I already bought for the iPhone was Monopoly, and it's just an upscaled version, and the upscaled version works great on the iPad. You can see it's not as crisp as the iPad apps, but this was the first app for the iPhone that I played on the iPad that looked good, looked well enough to play. And interestingly enough, since the iPad is a device that you more share with people, it was the first time I've ever played a shared game of Monopoly where you pass the iPad around the table and take your turn. On the iPhone, they have the app, but who's going to want to play Monopoly on the iPhone where other people can't see what's going on? With the iPad, you can see what's going on, and that's the real appeal of it. It's a shared device. I could see potentially hundreds of board games on the iPad that create this as the ultimate consumption device for games, for sharing an experience with a game. And it's a wonderful device to do that with. So gaming is huge. I have not installed Nova yet. I'm excited to try that out when I have additional funds to do that. And some other apps I'd like to just point out are the music instrument apps. I'm a composer, a musician, and I go to Butler University, so it's a very exciting time right now with the Final Four and the championship game tomorrow. But I tested out some apps. The first is Air Harp, and it's cool because it gives you a guideline of where you want to go. For instance, this is Dinah, and I'm playing this now in the background, but you simply pluck the strings of the harp, and it's a great app. If you want to harp, if you are a harp player, if you just are interested in different instruments, Air Harp is a wonderful application. I'd recommend. Accordion is a wonderful application. It's spelled in a different manner. Actually, it's spelled accordion on the iPad, but check out the Accordion app. I'm not sure the actual spelling. I'll try to get that in the show notes if I can. But Accordion's wonderful. The one I really want to highlight is Magic Piano. Magic Piano is by the same guys that made Acornia on the iPhone, which is the iPhone app that you use to simply blow into the microphone. It picks up that. And it's like the first air wind instrument for the iPhone, right? With the iPad, they've got Magic Piano. And when you launch the application, it's just a black screen with two icons on it. And it's really going to be a great app for new music ensembles, for composer orchestras, where you're playing more abstract music that you don't need a set pitch. You don't need to find out if this is an A or a B. Instead, you're just creating music, going with your sensitivity and trying to paint a canvas of emotions through you're not quite sure what note you're playing. And it seems I'm playing with it now. You can go chromatically down, but it's an unusual app. It's a fun app. You're actually able to do duets across people worldwide and things like that. But Magic Piano, I wasn't quite sure by looking at the application and different screenshots what it would do. The video on Mashable really got a good glimpse about what it's all about. And it's a great app. That's one app I would highly recommend. Magic Piano for the iPad. It's a wonderful app. Highly recommended for the iPad. Now I'd like to move on to some just different media consumption tools on the iPad. The iPad, as I talked about on the living room pad episode, is going to be a great device to consume your media, to bring it all together on one device. And I'm finally going to start reading, a newspaper. I'm reading USA Today through the iPad app. I've never been one to read the news, only RSS feeds. But on the iPad, I'll start reading the news simply because it's an enjoyable experience and it gives me the news that I need. So USA Today is a free app. It works great. I also have CNN, not the app, but instead the webpage. It works wonderfully on the iPad. So check that out. Add that to your iPad home screen. So news will come in great. Your papers will come in great through the iPad. Find the apps that you like and go with it from there. As far as ebook reading, iBooks is my recommendation. I tried the Kindle app. Other people like the Kindle iPad app better. I don't. The one nice feature it does have is it allows you to change from black and white to sepia to the traditional white. But the thing about it was I like the iPad app simply because the animations are so much nicer and prettier. The implementation to buy books is better. For example, I believe I'm not the only one here that I'll be downloading a bunch of book samples. And if by the time I'm done with reading up until the sample limit, I'll buy the book. On the Kindle app, you can't buy books through the application itself. You have to leave the app, go to Safari, buy it, or get a sample. I'm not sure if you're even able to do a sample with that, but it's not as aptly of an experience. So, for example, I've got some different books on samples. I've got the Lord of the Rings. They've got the whole 3 books of the Lord of the Rings on the iPad, and they give you 125 pages of a sample. So that gets you up through, let's see, I'm loading it up right now. I'm on chapter, page 125. It gives you up until, I'm trying to see what chapter this is. It's, let's see. So it's in book 1, chapter 3 is where it brings you to. So it gives you the first 3 chapters of the Fellowship of the Ring with the iBook app, and you're easily able to access bookmarks and things like that, and resume where you left off. It's a wonderful, wonderful experience, the iBook store. I wasn't sure how it would go over. The samples really make it. Buying samples, you don't buy samples, they're free, but samples really make the experience complete. And the Project Gutenberg books are wonderful. I've got the Adventures of Sherlock Holmes, and it's great to have that content in there as well. So iBooks is a really pleasant experience, and I'm going to be starting to read more and more books simply because of the iPad. In a similar manner, I'm going to be starting to use comic books more. The Marvel Comics app is a wonderful example of how they'll start to grab people that haven't read comic books in the past. I'm not a person that reads a bunch of comic books in the real world, but on the iPad, it's such an enjoyable experience. Within the first 6 or 7 frames of the X-Men app, X-Men comic that I downloaded, I was completely engaged with the comic, with the story, with the characters. And it engages you in a way that I've never felt with a comic before, except for that in movies. So comic books are going to be big. I'm going to probably start reading more and more as I find different series that I like. I also tried out some blown up books on the iPad. And blown up books don't give you a good experience at all. I mean, you can read it, it's readable, but really, blown up apps are not the way to go. I also tried out Logos Bible study software as well as Bible HD, and both of those worked great. I'd like if those apps had more of the ability to add your own notes and highlights and things like that. I think adding notes and highlights are going to be big. iBooks does that well. So those are some thoughts on just different media devices, media consumption tools on the iPad. There are some others I'd like to talk about really quickly. The ABC player works great. I'd love to see NBC and the other companies do that. They have that through the web browser, but it's not as good of an experience. The Netflix app, as you've heard, is a great app. They need a user interface cleanup, but otherwise it's great. It's very functional. It does what it needs to do. And I also have the TwitPad installed, and that's a great app for just accessing the Twit network, which I'm a fan of. I listen to Leo Laporte and all of the material he does. And, of course, all of your other ways you access content are on the iPad that you had with the iPhone. So those are some thoughts on some other apps that I've been checking out, and I've really been loving the experience of the iPad. It makes my iPhone feel like, I don't know, it makes it feel like it's not as powerful, not as useful. It makes it feel tiny as I've been adjusting to applications spread out apart, and they actually don't look bad spread out apart. I thought I'd really hate the way the iPad is laid out with applications so widespread apart as they are. But it's simple, it's elegant, it's beautiful. And with the iPhone, they're all scrunched together, and it's just a totally different experience on the iPhone. And I'll start using each device in a different manner. I will be carrying around the iPad quite a bit. I'll have it with me pretty much all the time because I do see it as a great device for having with you at any time at the beck and call. If you're wondering what apps that I chose to have in my dock, some people might be curious about that. I've got the Safari app in the dock. I've got the Gmail bookmark in the dock, as well as Evernote, Logos, WeRule. I'm a big fan of that application. And I've got the iPod in the dock. So those are the applications I have in the dock. And overall, it's been a great experience, and I'll share some more thoughts in just a few seconds here. Okay, now for a quick trick or tip for the iPad. As many listeners are Google users, I am as well, and the first hiccup I experienced with the iPad is trying to set up Google Calendars to sync over to the iPad. And the problem I experienced was when you go to the Safari on the iPad, it recognizes it as an iPad, right? Because it is. And currently, Google is not set up to let you add other devices outside of an iPod Touch or an iPhone to change what calendars sync over to the iPad. Now, the simple fix to this is go if you are a Mac user, I'm not sure how to do this on Windows, but go to Safari on the Mac, go to Preferences, disable the JavaScript, and set your user agent via the developer panel up top. You can access that through the Secrets application on the Mac, but change the user agent to an iPhone. And then go to google.com/sync. I believe there's a M in front of all that, mobile, so m.google.com/sync, and select the iPad as the device you want to add calendars to. And through that, I was able to access and add all of my calendars to sync down to the iPad. So I'm now able to, just as I do with my iPhone, I've got 6 calendars that all sync up with my iPad. Initially, though, it was quite frustrating that Google disabled this feature for the iPad, but there are workarounds. Let me know if you have questions about how to do this, as I'm sure many people will be trying to get their Google Calendar sunk down to your iPad. Now, one quick thought about the App Store. The App Store works great on the iPad itself for finding iPad apps. The one gripe I'm finding over and over again is trying to find iPad apps on the iTunes desktop software. The problem I experience is when I go in the categories, when I try to search by subcategories, they mix them all up. They're all intermixed. It's impossible to tell apart which ones are iPhone apps and which ones are iPad apps. I'm not sure how they're going to fix this problem, but let me know if you guys have a solution for finding apps, iPad apps on the App Store on your desktop that are not featured or in the top 100 list. What's the way you guys use to find your apps for the iPad? Do you just use the iPad App Store because it is probably the easier way to do this right now? What do you guys do? I am really curious about this because it's driving me nuts trying to find new iPad apps on the App Store. So let me know what you guys think about this at 209-542-iPad or iPadPossibilities@gmail.com. So those are some of my thoughts about everything that has been going on in the iPad world these past few days. And as I've gotten my hands on an iPad, my experiences with it. Another quick thought is Scotty Vest does work excellent with the iPad, as I said earlier. So if you want a way to walk around with your iPad with you without a bag, Scotty Vest is the way to go. They work great, and you just slide it in, slide it out. It was very easy. It doesn't take a lot of work. You're able to pull it in and out without thought, basically. It goes right in and out very simply, very easily. So those were my thoughts about the iPad and the launch and everything like that. As many people know, we did shoot a lot of coverage on Saturday. That is why we did not have the live show tonight. I wanted to give everyone a break there and give John and Ryan a break from all of that, with Saturday being so crazy, I like to say, with all the iPad stuff going on. It was a blast to do everything like that, but it did... I'm trying to still edit all that together and find some episodes out of that. So what I'll be doing is over this next week, I'll be editing audio and video of things we shot on Saturday. We did shoot a lot of information, a lot of interviews, and we'll be putting that all together for shows this next few weeks. It may take me a couple weeks to edit those down for shows. In the meantime, I'll be recording new shows with brand new content, not from the Saturday, and then I'll be probably releasing the Saturday content as bonus episodes throughout the next few weeks. So you may experience episodes on a daily basis in some weeks. In other cases, we'll just get the typical Monday, Wednesday, Friday for the application people, and Tuesday, Thursday, Saturday for the non-app people. So that's our plans for the Saturday footage. If you go to Ustream and go to the channel iPad Possible, that's the channel we shot with, and you can check out all the live footage there. And we'll be posting that to the Possibilities Network very soon here. I also would like to have a shout out to all the developers out there. I would love if you guys are looking for a way to promote your application and share it with the iPad community as far as what your app brings to the possibilities and potential of this device. I would love if you guys could start sending me some promo codes. As I do have an iPad now, I can start testing out your apps and letting all my listeners know what your apps bring as far as potential to the iPad and further its use case in creating a more productive machine, a more useful computer, which the iPad is. So if you want to start sending me promo codes, if you want to start sending me beta software, I'll send you my UDID numbers, and just let me know what you guys, what you developers need from me to start testing out your apps, and I'll start doing that and talking about them on the show. As well as I'm also looking for developers to talk to. I'd love to set up some interviews with you guys that are developing iPad apps. What does your app bring to the iPad as far as more potential, more possibilities? What do your apps do that will help the iPad community and help people such as Anthony Moody switch over from a laptop to an iPad as your main computer? So I'd love to do some interviews and just speak with all of you developers out there that are writing applications. I think the iPad is going to be huge, even bigger than the iPhone perhaps, just because of the form factor and what the iPad brings to the table. So developers, I am available to start working with you guys to promote your material and do that through interviews and just testing out your apps on my iPad and talking about them on the show. And for all of you listeners out there, I'd love for some more feedback. Feedback is always welcomed at iPadPossibilities@gmail.com. And send in your voice comments at 209-542-iPad. That's 209-542-4723. Send those voicemail messages in so I can start answering and putting those on the show. And as you have your iPads, let me know what you think. What are your icons that you put in your dock? What are the things that you do with your iPad now? What are you excited about that now that you have the iPad, now that it is everything you thought that it would be? Or if it's not, let me know that too. I think it's an incredible device, but as always, send your feedback to me at iPadPossibilities@gmail.com. I would like to take a moment to recognize It's On My Way. Once again, that they were the developers that enabled me to go to Cincinnati and bring you all of that live footage to cover the iPad launch. So I'd like to thank them once again for sponsoring that trip. It was a huge benefit that they enabled me to do all of that for you guys. So go to the App Store today. It's $2.99. It's On My Way to help support this show by supporting them. If you'd like to support this show, you can do that in a couple of different ways. As always, go to iTunes and subscribe to this show. It helps bring up the count in iTunes so people see the show and see it's available to listen to. Also, please leave a review. Those really help bring the visibility of the show in iTunes and letting people know about this show as well. As always, just let your tech friends know about this show as well. That's a great way. Just promote this show. Let people know about podcasting. A lot of people haven't heard of podcasting. Let them know. If it's not this show, just spread the word about podcasting. A lot of people don't know about it, and let them know about it. It's a great medium, I think, to share information and share ideas around. If you'd like to monetarily help out this show, you can do that in one of two ways. First off, the iPad Possibilities podcast app is available on the App Store for $2.99. It is optimized for the iPhone, not the iPad. I'm not sure when an update will be out to make it more iPad friendly. I'll be talking with Libsyn to figure that out. But it is available. You get the shows Monday, Wednesday, and Friday instead of Tuesday, Thursday, and Saturday. So you get the shows 24 hours in advance, and I'll be adding in some extra bonus features pretty soon. But for right now, you get the shows 24 hours in advance with the iPad Possibilities podcast app. You can also support the show by donating to the show at thepossibilitiesnetwork.com. Go to the iPad page and go down to the bottom. Help Tim buy an iPad, and that is a great way to donate to the show and will help me buy things for my iPad and applications and help test out things as is requested for you guys. So I'd love donations there. And as always, please send your feedback to iPadPossibilities@gmail.com. Until Tuesday or Wednesday, whenever you do get the shows, this is Tim Chatton of the iPad Possibilities Podcast.